Before we dive in, everything I share here is based on peer-reviewed science and is for educational purposes only. I'm not your doctor. Always check with your physician before starting any supplement. Now, let's get into what Big Pharma doesn't want you to know. There is a natural compound your body already produces that eliminates chronic pain at the molecular level. It has no addiction potential, zero withdrawal symptoms, no overdose risk. It costs $1 a day. A Nobel Prize-winning scientist spent 40 years of her life proving it works. Over 30 peer-reviewed clinical trials confirmed her findings, and 79,358 Americans died last year taking the drug the pharmaceutical industry sold them instead. They did not stop recommending this compound because it failed. They stopped because it worked too well. A molecule your own body already produces cannot be patented. And what cannot be patented cannot generate billions in quarterly revenue, so they buried it. While opioids turned into the deadliest pharmaceutical crisis in American history, this compound sat in scientific journals, available, proven, and invisible to the 50 million Americans living in chronic pain. This is the story of PAA, Palmitoylethanolamide, the natural pain molecule that Big Pharma prayed you would never find. Welcome to the Professor Ming channel. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Here we open the files they locked shut. The year is 1943. Nazi-occupied Italy. A young Jewish neuroscientist named Rita Levi Montalcini is hiding in a basement in Florence, conducting illegal research by candlelight. The Nazis have banned Jews from every university in Italy. Her laboratory has been destroyed twice by Allied bombing. She refuses to stop. She studies the human nervous system, convinced that something inside the body itself holds the answer to chronic suffering. 14 years later, in 1957, researchers at Merck, the pharmaceutical giant that today generates over $60 billion a year, isolate a fatty acid molecule from peanuts, soybeans, and egg yolks. They call it palmitoylethanolamide. Initial tests reveal powerful anti-inflammatory properties. At doses so small, the researchers run the experiment 3 times to confirm the result. Here is the first number the opioid industry does not want you to see. PEA was discovered in 1957, 12 years before the United States approved the first synthetic opioid for widespread prescription use. The natural solution existed before the pharmaceutical one was ever manufactured, but PEA had a problem that would follow it for 7 decades. It is a naturally occurring molecule. It exists in food. It exists inside the human body. You cannot patent nature. Without a patent, there is no exclusive market. Without exclusivity, there is no incentive to fund the $2.6 billion clinical trial the FDA requires for full drug approval. PEA was not abandoned because it failed the science. It was abandoned because it passed it too completely to ever become profitable. In 1993, 36 years after Merck first isolated PEA, Rita, now an 84-year-old Nobel Prize laureate, publishes a landmark paper identifying the precise biological mechanism behind the molecule. PEA activates the PPAR-alpha receptor inside the body's own endocannabinoid system, directly instructing mast cells and glial cells to stop generating the inflammatory cascade that produces chronic pain. It does not block pain signals the way opioids do. Opioids flood the brain's reward system with artificial signals, hijacking the dopamine pathway and building the neurological dependency that kills 224 Americans every single day. PEA does none of that. It works upstream, at the source. No hijacked reward pathway, no dependency, no withdrawal, no overdose threshold. The clinical evidence is not theoretical. A 2230 meta-analysis published in PMC analyzed 11 double-blind randomized controlled trials involving 774 patients. PEA produced a statistically significant reduction of 1.68 points on the 11-point pain scale versus placebo, clinically meaningful results in 4 to 6 weeks. 0 serious adverse events across all trials. A 2025 meta-analysis in PubMed confirmed those findings and added one data point no opioid study has ever produced. Not one single patient across 60 years of PEA clinical trials has developed an addiction. Not one. $1 a day. 0 addiction cases. 30 peer-reviewed studies against a drug prescribed 191 million times per year in the United States, carrying the FDA's black box warning for addiction, overdose, and death. The science was never the problem. Before I continue, I have compiled everything the pharmaceutical industry does not want you to know about natural pain management into the complete Professor Ming Health Vault. The full PEA protocol, exact dose, form, and verified sourcing guide. The anti-inflammatory nutrition framework. Foods clinically shown to reduce chronic inflammation at the cellular level. The suppressed compounds database. 12 natural molecules with peer-reviewed clinical evidence that never made it into your doctor's office because not one of them can be patented. All of it in one place. No fluff. Straight to the point. The link is in the description and the QR code is on your screen right now. Go open the vault. But stay here. The most important part is coming next. Now, let me show you what the alternative cost. In 1996, Purdue Pharma launches OxyContin with a fabricated claim delivered to physicians across the United States. This opioid is different. The addiction risk is less than 1%. That claim was invented. Purdue's own internal documents, later unsealed in federal court, showed executives knew the addiction risk within 2 years of launch. They kept selling. The numbers that follow are not statistics. They are people. 500,000 Americans dead from opioid overdose between 1999 and 2019. 79,358 dead in 2023 alone. 224 Americans dying every single day, 1 every 6 minutes. While you watch this video, $8 billion, the criminal settlement Purdue Pharma paid after pleading guilty to federal charges. $11 billion, the personal profit the Sackler family collected from OxyContin sales while those families buried their people. $1 a day versus $11 billion in personal profit. That is not a market failure. That is a decision. Here is the architecture of how that decision was built and maintained. PEA cannot be patented. Under United States patent law, naturally occurring substances are not patentable subject matter. No pharmaceutical company can protect a molecule the human body already produces. Without a patent, there is no exclusive market. Without exclusivity, the return on a $2.6 billion Phase 3 FDA clinical trial becomes mathematically impossible to justify. So PEA never received full FDA approval as a treatment for chronic pain. Without FDA approval, insurance companies will not cover it. Without insurance coverage, physicians trained inside a reimbursement-based system have no financial pathway to prescribe it. Without prescriptions, the 50 million Americans living with chronic pain never hear the word. And without awareness, the opioid prescription, covered, reimbursed, aggressively marketed by a $19 billion pharmaceutical sales force, remains the only option they are ever offered. $3 a day for PEA, against $1,300 a month for branded extended-release opioids. The system was not designed to suppress PEA, it was designed to generate revenue. The suppression was simply the result. In October 2025, after 500,000 deaths, the FDA finally issued new guidance to expand non-opioid options for chronic pain. The opioid crisis began in 1996, 29 years, 500,000 dead. The FDA calls it new guidance. Here is what the research shows you can do. The form with the strongest clinical evidence is ultramicronized PEA, processed to maximize absorption through the intestinal wall. Standard PEA without micronization has significantly lower bioavailability. Look for the word ultramicronized on the label. The clinically studied dose is 300 to 600 milligrams taken twice daily with food. A 2003 clinical trial in Naples enrolled sciatica patients who had failed standard pharmaceutical treatment. After 60 days on 600 milligrams of ultramicronized PEA twice daily, pain scores dropped an average of 45%. 0 patients reported addiction symptoms. 0 serious adverse events. A 2200 trial in diabetic neuropathy, one of the most treatment-resistant forms of chronic pain, showed 52% reduction in burning and shooting pain over 12 weeks. PEA requires 4 to 6 weeks of consistent use to reach full therapeutic effect. It works at the source of inflammation rather than masking pain signals. The reduction builds gradually and holds. Ultramicronized PEA is available without a prescription in the United States as a dietary supplement. Average monthly cost between $25 and $40. Rita Levi Montalcini took PEA every single day for the last 40 years of her life. She survived Nazi occupation, 2 laboratory bombings, and decades of institutional dismissal by an industry that could not monetize her work. She won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1986. She continued publishing research into her 90s. She lived to 103 years old. 3 years before her death, she said, "The body already knows how to heal itself. Our task is only to stop preventing it." The industry's task was different. While 500,000 families buried someone who was only trying to stop hurting, the compound that Nobel Science validated sat in a supplement aisle for $1 a day. Rita knew, the journals knew, 60 years of clinical trials knew. The 50 million people living in chronic pain did not know, because knowing them was never profitable. This knowledge did not disappear. It was here through the entire opioid crisis. It was here when the Sackler family collected their billions. It was waiting in peer-reviewed journals that the pharmaceutical sales force had no incentive to open. If this video reached you, you now know what 50 million Americans in chronic pain were never told. Subscribe and share this with anyone you know who is living with chronic pain or watching someone they love manage it. Every share puts this in front of someone who may never find it any other way. The next vault opens soon, and what they buried this time goes even deeper. Professor Ming.